The following morning, would-be rescuers glimpsed the terrible remains of Swissair 111. Only one body was discovered intact. In Geneva, Ian Shaw had a premonition about his 23-year-old daughter, Stephanie.
That night, the night on which she was due to return, for reasons I can't explain even now, I was restless and I was disturbed, and I slept early and woke while my wife was still awake and asked her if she had had news of Stephanie. No, she had not, but she didn't expect to have news of Stephanie. We knew she was coming on that flight and that she would certainly expect me to be at the airport to fetch her in the morning. I awoke around 6 Geneva time, and on television there was a report of the crash of Swissair 111. And I knew instantaneously that we had lost our daughter.
Air traffic controller Bill Pickrell was in shock.
It's a strange experience. I'm not sure that I can adequately express the feelings, but it's you work to provide a service, and you read about aircraft flying into a mountain or ending up in a swamp in some distant country, but you never expect that it's going to happen in your backyard. And when it does, it's kind of a lonely experience, I guess, in one sense.
The Transportation Safety Board of Canada launched what would become the largest disaster investigation in the nation's history. They only knew Swissair 111 experienced a cockpit fire, but what caused it remained a mystery.
Well, this accident was a challenging one to investigate, in that initially, of course, we had to recover the aircraft from about 55 meters of water, around 185 feet. Of course, it was also in many pieces. As it turns out, it was in a couple of million pieces. So that was the initial challenge. And then after that, of course, when you have so many pieces, you need to determine which are the relevant ones and what are these pieces telling you about what happened and why.
The TSB embarked on a 5-stage plan. First, divers were deployed to survey the wreckage. They discovered that the plane was smashed into millions of pieces. But as the autumn weather worsened, the risks to divers increased. At this rate, the salvage would take years to complete. Stage 2. With help from the United States Navy, remote-operated vehicles began a more detailed search. The ROVs helped investigators survey the site. But the question remained: how to recover tiny pieces of twisted metal from the bottom of the sea?
We have to go through little bits of airplanes, little pieces. In Swissair, we've had about 2 million pieces of airplane, and we pretty much almost had to look at them all because we had to discredit certain things, terrorists, bombs, various other types of faults.
The TSB's investigators finally got the breakthrough they've been seeking: the black boxes. Recordings of cockpit and computer data told investigators that everything on the plane was working perfectly until the last few minutes.
When the crew declared the pan, that they had smoke in the cockpit, after going through all of these parameters, we found no anomalies or no problems in any of that flight data that suggested there was a problem with the aircraft. So this led us to believe that the crew had a relatively operational aircraft. Aside from the smoke in the cockpit that they noted, everything else appeared to be working fine. And as they were making their plan to descend the aircraft, they experienced a series of systems failures that were in rapid succession and exponential.
Copy that. Autopilot disconnect. Swiss Air 111, we must fly manually now.
Mike Poole's CVR team then faced a serious setback. The last 6 minutes on both flight recorders were missing.
You're losing systems rapidly on the airplane in that 90-second period that things are happening very fast. And one of the last things we know about was the 2 recorders went offline. So the fire has presumably breached the lines, breached the sources to these recorders and has stopped them.
With the failure of the black boxes, investigators were no closer to learning how or where the fire started on Swiss Air 111. Stage 3. Barges were deployed to scour the seabed for evidence. One by one, sad remnants of the airplane reached the surface. Her engines were recovered. Then the landing gear. These were among the largest pieces of Swiss Air 111 to be recovered. The rest were mere fragments, dredged up in a painfully slow process. Stage 4. A nearby military hangar provided a makeshift lab for the growing team of forensic investigators. Representatives from the American NTSB, Boeing, Swiss Air, and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police joined in the search for answers. Pieces of Swiss Air 111 arrived by the truckload, organized into various categories for analysis. Soon the hangar was stacked to capacity with the biggest jigsaw puzzle in aviation history. All the investigators knew for sure was that an initially small cockpit fire suddenly turned to catastrophe. The team sorted through nearly 155 miles of wiring retrieved from the wreckage of Swiss Air 111. Here, the first real clue: evidence of electrical arcing. Scorch marks on metal revealed that the source of the fire was in the back of the cockpit, directly behind the first officer. By examining the aircraft's wiring plans, investigators found a likely suspect: the entertainment system in first class.
The system had some major deficiencies. It was getting very hot. It drew a lot of power. And thereby, for example, raising the cabin temperature considerably, because it was always running. They did not install a simple off switch, nor did they install appropriate cooling systems to cool the system down.
The TSB's investigators finally thought they had the breakthrough they'd been seeking.
Our report indicates that there was a design flaw in the way the in-flight entertainment network installed in the first class and business class sections of the aircraft were installed integrated into the electrical system of the airplane.
When Captain Zimmerman threw the cabin bus switch, all power to the cabin should have been switched off. But the entertainment system remained on, overheating.
If you'd ask most pilots, they would say, well, if I push the cabin butt switch, it's going to turn off the things behind the cockpit. It's going to isolate that electrically for me so that I don't have to worry about that, and that I can just concentrate on those things that might affect me flying the airplane. Well, as it turns out, that this switch was kind of bypassed in this case for this IFIN, or entertainment system.
Swiss Air immediately disabled the entertainment systems on the rest of its fleet, and the US National Transportation Safety Board ordered an inspection of cockpit wiring on all MD-11s. Unfortunately, this simple solution proved insufficient.
By the time that cabin switch was turned off, the fire was well underway, and so that had no real bearing on the initiation or propagation of the fire in the Swiss Air 111 aircraft.
But investigators determined that the problem with the entertainment system alone could not have brought down Swissair 111. The search for answers continued. Stage 5. Undaunted, the TSB reconstructed the MD-11 from the wreckage. A wireframe mock-up they called the jig provided a spine for placing tiny pieces back where they once belonged. The reconstruction revealed that the fire spread with alarming speed from the cockpit back into the first-class galleys. Some metal showed heat damage from temperatures as high as 600 degrees centigrade. As the investigation continued, some argued that the actions of the pilots may have contributed to the disaster. Some experts charged that Zimmerman and Love's by-the-book approach may have cost them their lives.
Swissair 111 was asking internally.
Some operators emphasized in a very early stage, land as soon as possible, and then if you have time, go into the checklist. Others said, here's the checklist, and at the end of the checklist, if that doesn't help, then land as soon as possible. Pretty contradictory to basic flying instructions where student pilots learn at a very early stage that whenever you have smoke, you have a fire, and fire means land as soon as possible.
Emergency light switch on. Emergency light switch on.
Unfortunately, in this case, the way the checklist was written, it didn't identify that now start towards the divert. It started more on let's try to see if we can solve the problem. And so now all of a sudden you're taking on a problem that just kind of crept up on you. You weren't expecting it.
We're going to need more than 30 miles.
But the TSB considered the timeline. Investigators determined that Swissair 111 would not have made Halifax Airport under any circumstances. There just wasn't enough time.
09er.
In our calculation, we showed that starting at the ideal descent point from 33,000 feet, which was at about 10:14 p.m. that night, it would take some 13 minutes to get the airplane onto the ground, which would take us to 10:27 p.m. By 10:24, the systems in the aircraft were starting to deteriorate. So we believe that under these circumstances, the crew would not have been able to successfully land the airplane under those conditions with the amount of time that they had.
Whatever caused the fire on Swissair, it happened at a lethal speed. The mystery remained. A year passed, then another ambitious operation began. The TSB hired a sophisticated Dutch salvage ship, Queen of the Netherlands. The vessel has a gigantic vacuum system, capable of dredging even the tiniest pieces of Swissair 111 from the ocean floor. A mixture of seawater, silt and aircraft were pumped into the ship's hold. This cargo was then pumped into a specially constructed reservoir on shore. When the water drained away, investigators found another 1 million pieces of the aircraft. Any one of them may have held the clue to what caused the catastrophic fire. The painstaking sorting once again resumed. Finally, after 15 months, they found what they'd been seeking: a single faulty wire.
We looked at all of the possible sources of heat that might start a fire in that area. And in this instance, we did discover a wire that arced in that way. And right next to it was some very flammable material called metallized polyethylene terephthalate covering material that covers the insulation blankets.
This polyethylene insulate, which lined the MD-11, is common on commercial airlines worldwide. It has passed the industry's flammability tests that require materials to self-extinguish after a reasonable period of time. The investigation now took an abrupt turn. Instead of seeking the cause of the fire, the TSB now focused on the flammable materials that fueled it.
This thermal-acoustical material that was in this aircraft was very flammable, even though it passed a test. It does sustain and it does propagate flame. So this investigation did focus on the flammability of materials and the requirement to reassess the criteria that is used to certify materials, not just thermal-acoustical insulation blanket material, but also other materials that goes into aircraft, much of it in hidden areas.
Investigators now had their answer. A wire arced in a closed space behind the cockpit. The arc ignited the insulation, which in turn lit other materials, such as foams and plastics. The pilots could not sense how quickly the fire intensified, but 14 minutes after they declared pan, 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 the fire disabled all electronics in the cockpit. The black boxes went dead. A forensic examination also shed light on the desperate final minutes in the cockpit. Love was in his seat. Captain Zimmerman was not, likely fighting the fire and probably dead before impact.
The first officer was probably trying to find a place where he could put this big airplane. He just didn't have a lot going for him. He didn't have a lot of instrumentation left. And I'm sure he was looking for something, some indication that would give him an idea of where he could put the airplane down, maybe even ditch the airplane.
What is known is that the first officer was in his seat. Whether he was unconscious, conscious, maybe had severe degree burns on his skin, it's not known. We know the captain was not in his seat, so very likely he was trying to fight the fire. That the checklists were found molten together, the pages, indicates that they were used to fight a fire.
At 10:30 Halifax time, Love shut down engine 2. Investigators determined that he probably received a warning the engine was on fire. Chillingly, it proved that Love was alive a minute before impact. They could not determine whether the passengers were aware of the fire, at least until the very final moments.
There were traces found of soot and smoke extending as much far to the business class overhead area. Whether the passengers have smelled the smoke, it's not known. DNA analysis showed that they had no residue in their body.
The aircraft hit the water with a force of 350 Gs. The TSB spent 4.5 years and $40 million analyzing the wreckage of Swissair 111, the largest air disaster investigation in Canada's history. Their conclusion: flammable materials do not belong on commercial aircraft.
The rate of progression in this airplane, I think, surprised us and surprised others, and that's why we emphasize, again, the importance of raising the bar on the flammability standards for materials used in airplanes.
Ian Shaw waited 4 years for the report to reveal the fatal flaw that took the life of his daughter. The truth has not diminished his anger at Swissair.
There has to be accountability. If you are involved in wrongdoing, you must be held accountable. And you must declare your sense of responsibility. Otherwise, you are hiding. and you are hiding, in this case, behind the flag of Switzerland. I think it's unbelievable.
In the aftermath, Swissair decided to remove the flammable insulet from its entire fleet. They also made changes to checklist procedure, reducing response time in a cockpit smoke emergency.
Swissair did something very interesting. They modified their entire Swissair MD-11 fleet according to all these findings. They built in cameras and smoke detectors, even into hidden areas, where pilots have a little TV monitor and they can see whenever there is a smoke warning, which makes them all help gain time. And that's the most important when you have the case of, when you have a fire.
But plagued with financial problems, the mighty Swissair shocked the industry when it declared bankruptcy in October 2001. The flammable insulation that set Swissair ablaze remains in 2/3 of commercial airplanes today, but not for very much longer.
The metallized polyethylene terephthalate material has been essentially banned from aircraft, and the criteria to certify that kind of material for use in airplanes has been worked on. It has not been put into law as yet, but we look forward to that being done, so the criteria is more stringent.
The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has given a deadline of 2005 to remove the material from all commercial aircraft. This major overhaul is designed to ensure that what took place on Swissair 111 will never happen again.
The industry is trying to remove it, but I don't think they're removing it as quickly necessary as they could. There's always that battle. How expensive is it to do something that's replacement, or are you going to replace it in an airplane you're going to throw away in another couple years? We have to live within certain economic realities.
For Ian Shaw, losing his daughter so suddenly and violently has left a permanent emotional scar. He left his wife and his wealth behind in Geneva and now runs a modest restaurant in Nova Scotia in view of the sea where his daughter died.
Why would I come here to this particular point in Nova Scotia? A lot of people have said, oh yes, we fully understand you want to be close to your daughter and the point where the plane crashed. That is no part of my being here. Swissair ripped out of me any possibility of proximity to my daughter. I found a comfort in the awareness of the presence of the eternal ocean, the ocean which has been going backwards and forwards for many, many, many thousands, millions of years. I came here because I had to. I can't give a fully rational declaration to you of why I came here. I can only say to you, I am in the right place for the wrong reasons.